England, right? They won a rugby match. They scored 42 points. They beat Italy pretty comprehensively in the end. However, I want to put to you, still not good enough, is it? Hi, I'm an ex-England player right now, even though I'm wearing a Romanian rugby shirt. And what I want to say to you is England should be winning every game by 86 points, and they should be playing entirely a team of 18-year-olds each week who have to have 50 caps each, otherwise it's not good enough, and these are the standards England need to be setting. Don't care who the game's against, every game, 50 points. But Italy, 90 points.
But also, in those 50 caps, they need to have won all of them. Or else.
Yeah.
And some of them, that's still not good enough. I'm a bit bored of them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a bit tired of them. You know, I'm talking your Owen Farrells, I'm talking your Ben Earls, I'm talking your Jamie Georges. Anyone who's been world class for England over the years, drop them.
Get rid of them. Get rid of them. Cast them out.
Yeah.
Cast them out. So England did beat Italy. They won in pretty convincing fashion in the end. However, the game over the first half was pretty tight. It was pretty close. Yeah. This is, we talked about in our preview, the only fixture in Six Nations that's gone the same way every single time. It's the only fixture that's never been won by Italy. It's the only team they've never beaten from the Six Nations. That record continues for at least another year. And I think England were ultimately good for their win. However, Italy did stand up and did offer something of a fight.
Yeah, eventually, by the 80th minute, it was exactly as we predicted. It was the England performance over Italy, where they tear them apart and so on. And yet, as you say, at half-time, extremely close game. And there's a part of you that thinks, oh, could this be the one where Italy stand up and actually get it? And the answer was no. It was a very convincing second half by England.
And it was pretty early in the second half things swung.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there was the defensive set right at the start of the second half where Italy threw 8 really solid, like, convincing phases at England in a row, all with, like, genuine, realistic dummy runners, like, playing with good width, good shape, and so on. Good, like, many options. And England just held it out. Yeah. And Benno comes up with the jackal penalty. They kick down the line, and not long after that, they scored the first try of the second half. Yeah. And at that point, I kind of thought, okay, that's Italy dead and buried. And the only
it felt
kind
that
of
bit, didn't it?
Yeah, the only crumb that Italy got in the second half after that really was the Menoncello try, which I look back at that and think, like, how does England concede that? Like, I look at Italy's tries in the first half and I go, oh, they were really good by Italy. Yeah. That one I kind of go like, oh, that is a team that's fatigued and is switched off. And no doubt Joel Abd is looking at them and going like, lads, what are we doing here?
Yeah. So I think it is interesting to focus on Italy a little bit, because I do think this performance was fascinating in as much as Italy's current weaknesses are exactly lined up to England's strengths.
Yeah.
And their defence, I think, is the thing I want to pull up a little bit. We talked about this a bit previously over the tournament. But Italy's defence at the minute is fine. It's all right. Their system is built around a lot of single tackles to keep as many players on their feet as possible, right? They could, in theory, be looking at jackals, but the players don't really go for jackals. Like, the system feels like it's built to get jackal options on the ball and win the ball back, but we're very rarely seeing players go for them. Michele Lamoureux has barely attempted the jackal all Six Nations, which I think is interesting. There's one, like, absolutely clean-cut one he had on Saturday where he really could have gone for it, Sunday rather, where he really could have gone for it and he just didn't look for it.
I don't really think of Lamoureux as a jackal option at this point.
He used to be, though.
Yeah.
He used to be when he first came
I know
through.
he's capable of it, but I just don't think of him as that.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 players in the Italy team that I do think of as proper jackling options. In fact, no, Mamadou Zuliani is one.
Zuliani's one when
he's
comes
typically on the bench.
Yeah.
But in the starting team, I only really think of Giacomo Nicotera. Oh, yeah, I guess Fischetti, yeah. And Tommaso Menoncello, who is their best player at the breakdown.
Yeah.
Like, you could play Menoncello as an 8, and he would do a job. Like, he's really, really good at the breakdown, both on attacking and defensive ball. Yeah, you're right. Fischetti is very good over the ball.
Yeah.
As I say, like Nicotera as well, when he's kind of given the license to. But you're right, because it's not like Italy use their defence as their biggest weapon. It's not like they're flying off the line and causing the opposition to make errors, go for really risky plays, because you can't really with Brex as
really
your 13, because he's a bit slow.
Right. So the only players that ever fly up and try and apply proper line speed, and obviously everyone gets off the line and they push up and whatever, right? The only players that really apply proper line speed are the 2 centres.
Yeah.
They will shoot in and try and shut things down before it goes wider. But that is a last resort. Like, it is only ever used as a last resort to go and apply proper line speed and try and catch players out, to try and do anything aggressive in defence.
Or if it's so incredibly inevitably on, they have to kind of go for it. But if it's a bit of a risk, they don't do it because
so
it
the
exposes
forwards
Brex.
generally aren't really blitzing. They're not really putting any pressure on the opposition. And generally, they're going for one-man tackles. They're going to get one guy on, get them on the ground, and then you've got 13 players in a line there, right? They play for a very light backfield. They're one of only 2 teams in the Six Nations. Most international teams nowadays play with their 10 in the backfield. Italy don't. They're one of the very few teams that do that. They play with them in the main line. They play a 13-man line. So you have one kind of drop slightly behind and then the fullback properly behind. Most teams now are playing 12 or 13 players because the 50-22 threat and so on.
Yeah.
The kicking game is so emphasised, which this has led to an awful lot more attacking rugby and teams playing wide because they are dropping more into the backfield, which has been great. Italy aren't doing that. Italy wants as many players on their feet defending as possible. And this leads to them being very, very good at containing long phase attacks, right? If they get teams beyond 3, maybe 4 phases, they defend those first few, they can generally hold you out for almost infinite periods. There was one defensive set of a scrum 5 where they make a really good contact in the first 2 phases. Melancello stops his man dead, and in the following phase they catch him behind the gain line. And England ultimately just go backwards and backwards and backwards, and ultimately lose the ball, Italy turn it over, kick it long, clear into the halfway. However, what we saw is England able, because Italy's defence is built around withholding you for long phases. It's not even really built to get the ball back, as most teams who like to do that are. Most teams who like to just withstand are built around looking for turnover pressure, looking to force mistakes.
Or target set piece off the back of that. Yeah.
That isn't the case with Italy. I'm not really sure what the defence is trying to do other than just hold the opposition out. And I don't think that's enough because it means they're rarely in control of games, right?
Yeah.
And so their attack is largely the same as it was 2 years ago, and that perhaps isn't cutting it so much anymore. You know, I think Quesada's added some detail, and in some ways that has helped them be more accurate more consistently than they were under Crowley. But in other ways, I think there has actually been a little bit of straitjacketing in that they are less expressive than they were.
Yeah.
But with their attacks slightly weaker, largely through defences being better now and being more used to that very organised, like Ireland-style attack, and their defence not being built for this, it means they're only able to control the game through the kicking game, right?
Yeah.
And you look at the tries they did score, both of them came from kick return. Both of them came from a little chip over the top, they regather, and then spread it out, and then another second kick, which Marcus Smith has come into, as the fullback, has come into the line, he's defending at fly half, and then when they try the second chip over, Finn Smith comes up, rushes up on Ioane, because he's got to make that tackle, and it opens up the space behind for Capewoods to regather and score.
Yeah.
Right? It's coming off 2 kicks back to back, catching the fullback up, pulling the fullback out of position.
Yeah. And that also comes from on-line break. Finn Smith is originally in the line, and he then has to jet to the backfield and back up. It's such a difficult position for Finn Smith personally that he's going in 3 directions at once because they're so heavily on the back foot. It's exactly the inverse of what you were saying a minute ago about how Italy's defence gets contorted. You know, they do that to England.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other try, right, is obviously a counter-attack.
Yeah.
And Capewoods spots initially Garbisi, runs a good blocking line, then ducks back in at the last second. Lamoureux's positioning here is superb to block, but also he doesn't look like he's blocking. His body language is really good.
He doesn't change his line. He just jogs in a straight line, knowing that he can get in Ben Hill's way here and just give Capewoods that 1v1 against Jamie George.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's going to take that every day.
Yeah.
It's
And he
very
wins it.
smart by Lamoureux.
Breaks through, great support play, and they score it.
Yeah. Also, I love that Capewoods, like the way that he straightens on the ball to pass to Vincent there, that, you know, a lot of fullbacks will just, especially ones like Capewoods, will take on that defender and try and get the one-handed offload in.
Yeah.
But this ball isn't pumped up enough for me to get that in properly. A poor workman blames his tools. But instead, it's the way that he checks his feet and then kind of drifts onto the outside to pop that ball on the out.
Yeah.
Like, it's really, really nice. As I say, a lot of fullbacks would try and go themselves and get the offload in. But instead, I love that Capewoods does that because he knows how quick Vincent is. And it's a winger support line by Vincent.
Really
Vincent is like a winger in the way he plays. And the way that he then throws that dummy, Marcus Smith probably puts a little bit too much trust in Ellis Genge here to get back against a man who is at full tilt
But
already.
it's panic stations. He's got a split
100%.
second to think, right, okay, he can cover them. So.
It's not on Marcus Smith. The fullback position is a stitch-up at the best of times.
Yeah.
And Ross Vincent is rapid.
He's really quick. However, those 2 tries, right, both come off kick return. Their kicking game is the only way Italy are able to get in control of the game at the minute. And I talked about this a bit before, but I think it's becoming a real issue when their defence can't put any pressure on whatsoever. And particularly when you look at the way England are attacking to move on to England a little bit, right? So England's attack is not Ireland's and it's not France's, who are by some distance the two best attacks in the championship, right? Ireland's extremely structured. Everyone knows their role. Everyone is running set lines. Everyone knows what they're doing. France, the complete opposite. Everyone is improvising. Everyone is jamming. Everyone's just looking to create broken field scenarios in which they can potentially run and offload and do whatever else. England are somewhere in between, right? And they are trying to get individual small set pieces, small little structures into play so that they're being called by, very often Finn Smith and Marcus Smith from fullback. You saw Elliot Daly doing it as well before he was forced to move in, even though it was only 10 minutes in. And then that allows them to open up a little bit, right? There is some really nice bits to this, and we'll come on to a couple of those in a moment. But broadly, it is just them running quite simple phase shapes, but in improvised scenarios, in different situations. And this attack off slow ball is nothing. Like, it is incredibly predictable if the ball is slow and the opposition defence has got time to stop, set, and work out what they're going to do. However, off quick ball, it's absolutely lethal. And we saw this at the weekend. So what England were able to do really easily is because Italy were only doing one-man tackles, so they didn't have a second guy in, as we talked about in past with Wales and Scotland's defence, where they want to slow the ball down by getting a second guy in on the ball, so it's just slower to get the ball from initial contact to ball being presented. And they weren't contesting at the breakdown very much. It meant that they were able to generate quick ball. And yes, Italy still had a full 12 people on their feet, but it's so much easier. You look at the Marcus Smith try as maybe the best example of this, right? So England have incredibly fast ball here, and they hit out to this pod, and it's the moment that Tom Curry makes that carry. Ellis Genge takes it as first receiver, he tips on, he's already engaged one defender, right? Tom Curry then hits a brilliant line and manages to engage two. You've now got 3 Italian defenders engaged, and their system is built around everyone spreading out equilaterally, everyone being spread out. And so it means once 3 guys are taken out the line, they don't know what to do. So no one jams in, no one fills in, no one's in position around there. And Marcus Smith's line is brilliant. The way he adjusts out the back and sees this, spots this in real time, adjusts, becomes a supporting runner, and just about managed to get the call to Curry, who offloads. He goes through, he scores obviously because he's Marcus Smith and he's made a line break and he's incredibly quick. But yeah, it's a lovely bit of play by England, completely improvised, completely on the fly, completely different than they're looking to do in attack. However, it is generated through 2 faults of the Italian defence, which becomes the issue that these were happening pretty much all day long.
It's like your classic old school man-for-man defence that happened sort of 20-odd years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that is kind of the red flag around it. As you say, as soon as you realise that, because, sometimes it's very effective, but as soon as you're playing against an opposition who's worth something, they will sniff this out. Like, you mentioned Ellis Genge's carry there. I think that deserves so much credit because he carries so hard and gets so close to the line before he tips it on that he just manages to nudge Negri. Because Negri, he's no mug. He's able to double job and get onto the next guy. But if Genge passes this ball 2 frames earlier, Negri can push on to Tom Curry and finish him off in that double tackle, wrap up the ball, get him on the deck and get over it, But because of Genge taking it so hard to the line, Italy being on the back foot because of it being quick ball, not able to get off the line, that is the difference between Negri being off balance, not being able to get to Curry, and Negri winning a turnover from Curry because he's just got Genge here to clear out, maybe even Marcus Smith there to help him out, you're potentially taking the 10 out of the game. That is such a huge difference just because England's pack is so powerful, and sometimes we are as guilty as anybody, in fact more guilty than anybody, of overanalyzing rugby and just the chess of it all. Sometimes it is simple as Ellis Genge is bloody powerful,
and committed.
Right,
and he fights for everything.
Yeah.
And so you think he's coming in to absolutely smash his opposite man and make that dominant carry. So when he pops it off, it's a surprise to everyone.
Because 9 times out of 10 he does that.
Yeah.
He just runs into people.
Yeah.
It's what he's best at.
Yeah, even off the rugby field.
Yeah.
That's mostly what it's like to go to Bristol.
Yeah.
Is you get run into by Ellis Genge. So that enormously kind of, I guess, pivotal moment of the game. For me, I think that's the try that sums up what went on in this match, because I think Italy are not able to stay in control of the game when they're not kicking the ball. Their attack is no longer doing that, and their defence isn't doing that, and yet England are slowly building out all of those aspects to have all 3 capable of influencing the outcome.
And that's it, Italy thought they could get into the game through their attack. Then they got demoralised by that English turnover that I was on about earlier. And then this try scored, the Marcus Smith try. At that point, they've dismantled 2 parts of the Italian triangle. Just their kicking game left. And England didn't have any trouble with the kicking game. You know, like Finn Smith was brilliant with that. We said in the prediction, like, the important thing for Finn Smith is to not get carried away with this and not to try and overplay. And I think he played this game perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, that he just had the role of, you know what, I will manage the game. Alex Mitchell likewise, like his kicking was outstanding. Yeah, and then he popped up in attack when he needed to. His assist for the slight home second try was phenomenal. Like, he let the rest of the backline, especially when Marcus Smith came on early because of the very unfortunate injury to Ollie Lawrence. Finn Smith was fine. He just played his own game, and I think that was brilliant.
There is one thing I want to pull up on the England attack, though, before we finish, before we call it a day, and that is the lead up to the Tom Willis try.
Yes.
Right? So, some really good momentum by England. They start with a turnover ball in their own 22. They play upfield, blah, blah, blah. Elliot Daly makes some really good meterage. However, the interesting phase is the one directly before the break first comes, where we see, as I talk about, England have a set shape called where they just have a pod of forwards playing off Finn Smith, right? And even just 1 year ago, this would have just been these forwards running hard and straight and looking to commit inside shoulders. However, what we see instead is all of these England players break off and run different lines. So Jamie George starts to come back inside, one works outside, one works around the corner. We see them all pick completely different lines, which throws Italy's defence off for a second because they're going, okay, what's going on here? And it allows for that long ball over the top to Freeman, right? A year ago, England could have done this, but it's easy for the defender to go, okay, one of these guys is getting it, or they're getting it out there, right? But they see a guy cutting back inside and a guy hitting a different diagonal angle. Suddenly, they've got to watch 4 options instead of just kind of 2. Because even though there's 3 players there, really, if they're all running the same line, it's a very easy tackle to adapt to. It might be harder to stop them at the gain line, but you're still going to make the tackle, right?
Yeah.
Instead, they just force them to commit through getting the forwards to run more interesting angles, different angles. And it allows that ball to go over the top to Freeman, who gets it inside to Tom Curry. And then from there, you know, they recycle the ball, and a phase later, Tom Willis crashes over.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit of subtlety coming into the English attack. And this has come on in the last few weeks. Like, this is just a very subtle change, is the lines the forwards are picking when they're playing off 10. And I'm really interested by it.
And England are suddenly one of the most threatening teams on turnover ball.
Yeah.
All of a sudden. You know, that comes from Tom Willis himself hassling Stephen Varney at the back of the breakdown as he's looking to potentially kick the ball or get it back. And that they are straight away, like, the transition from D into attack is outstanding. And as you say, like, once they're downfield, that is Tom Willis's bread and butter, you know, is getting a 1v1 carry. And once again, sometimes it is as simple as that, you know.
I think there is, and we'll get onto this when we do a preview though, a bit of a concern for England because the way they attack is, as I talked about, you know, England's strengths being very much lined up with Italy's weaknesses.
Yeah.
Their strengths line up very well with Wales' strengths. So we may see the two of them just clash heads, and it may be a far more even contest, even though England should be a considerably better team than Wales. But I think they won't be able to generate the same quick ball. If they do, then they could run away with that game.
Yeah.
But I think they might struggle to do that, which could lead to the attack suddenly looking more stolid. And the likes of the former England players we talked about at the start coming in and going, well, why can't they attack like they did against Italy? Right? It's because that attack is so built around fast ball. Yeah. And if they can't get it, then the attack does not work whatsoever. And they go back to the kicking game that we've seen them playing and people have been so critical of because they built an attack that only works for quick ball.
Yeah, and ultimately, going back to the point I was saying earlier about, like, it's important for us to not overanalyze this from an English perspective, right? What this will come down to is the set piece.
Yeah.
How far forward will they go at scrum? Which then determines how far forward Tom Willis moves when he carries, Ellis Genge when he carries, you know, off the line out. How good is the ball they're getting? How far are they pushing Wales back on the maul? Because Wales love to slow down opposition's balls, like before they even get to the deck, right? But it's physically impossible, even if, well, for humans who aren't Jack Morgan or Derry Lake, who are built different. But for every other player in the Welsh team, it is not possible to do that when you are looking up at the last second and you're going, oh shit, I've got to tackle Tom Curry, you know? Like, if England can dominate a set piece, the whole rest of the game will just slot into place perfectly, I feel, against Wales. And Wales will want to frustrate them, obviously, because that is their kind of foothold into most games. It was in the Ireland one. In a way, it wasn't a Scotland one in the second half in particular. But, yeah, if England can just prevent that from happening, and obviously Wales' set piece had a little bit of a resurgence in the last couple of weeks, that is what's going to be such an interesting one. I've just skipped ahead to the preview.
Yeah, we'll get into the preview another time.
I'm going to repeat that point at the preview, all right? So just pretend you've not heard it before when you get there.
Only two of us. We've got so many opinions on rugby.
Exactly.
Anything else to add on England v Italy?
Yeah.
Yeah?
One thing that I'll add. So, as I mentioned earlier, very, very sad that Ollie Lawrence had to go off. Like, that was a horrible-looking injury.
He's in my fantasy team,
Yeah,
which was bullshit.
I had Marcus Smith as my super sub. I was pretty
Yeah,
pleased with it.
I thought about doing that, and I was like, oh, it's too expensive to take him out.
I hope Ollie Lawrence is okay, obviously, partially because of the injury, but mainly because it deprived him of an opportunity to touch Brex and to play on the same rugby field as Brex.
We just went like 20 minutes of talking about Italy without mentioning Brex once.
Yeah.
What's wrong with us?
I called him slow twice.
Shall we
in
resign?
fairness, but I just need to remind everybody that Brex is a baller.
He's
and
the
I
best
love him.
player there is.
He is.
Do we have to quit now?
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you. There will be
Brexit
no
is Brexit.
preview on Friday. You've just watched the last Squid Rugby video.